Hello and welcome to another album analysis. In today's video we're going to be delving into the newest studio album from the Swedish rock group Smash Into Pieces, titled Disconnect. The band have certainly been on a bit of a tear over recent years, releasing a slew of albums in a very short space of time without diminishing on any of the quality you would expect to hear on any of their albums. We do also have this big running theme that runs throughout all of their albums. It's almost like they've built a world for themselves, all revolving around Apoc, the Apocalypse DJ, who is their drummer. He is the musical version of The Stick. No one knows his identity. He's always wearing his Smash Into Pieces mask, but he's the main character in a lot of their story and a lot of their music videos. And they use him as a driving force. He is almost like what makes the band stand out, his status effectively, and how they've used him to build this story and allow the band to explore different elements through time. And we're going to see that trend continue with this album as well. On recent albums of Volver, also on Arcadia and A New Horizon, we've seen them explore these more electronic elements, which is something you can understand. You're fitting around this arcade theme, you want to hear those electronic sounds. But with this being Disconnect, we're going to be seeing a departure from electronic sounds. Not completely, they are still going to be making use of them, but we're going to see delve into a much more guitar-centric, very heavy sound, which is great to see given the title of the album. They're going back to something they did on some of their very early work from albums such as The Apocalypse DJ. So will this album really connect with you or simply leaving you wanting to pull the plug? Let's take a look at it track by track. Opening the album, we do have the title Disconnect, the title track of this album, but it is an instrumental piece coming in at 3 minutes. And one thing I love about this, with the way they've done it, usually we see songs like this at the outro of an album, but this track, what they've done is they're simply disconnecting themselves from their previous albums to how this album is going to sound. It's almost like a signing off piece, very soft electronic ambient sounds used in it, and for fans that have been following the band for quite some time, it almost signals the end of their previous chapter and then heading into the next part of their story. Then we do head into Reckoning, a track that has a very Egyptian-style guitar open, and gives this very historic feel to it as well, before it gets into the real big part of the track. And Reckoning has kind of references to Ra, almost, the idea of Egyptian gods, this big apocalyptic event happening, and we're going to see a lot of the lyrics reference that, kind of build in that desert theme effectively, Skinner's Broke, Beneath the Scorching Sun, and a variety of others. One other thing I want to touch on that they're going to be doing a lot on the start of this album is they're using these electronic and these background sounds to build this apocalyptic sound, these really big soundscapes that really just kind of make you feel very small in comparison to the music. The levels have all been boosted up as high as they possibly can, and it's almost like you're this little observer, this little figure kind of appearing before these apocalyptic events, almost as a witness. And we're going to be seeing that throughout a variety of these tracks going forward. One other thing to quickly note on this is the reference to kingdoms and gods, so again, referencing back to that idea of Ra. We have also got a very nice guitar solo that we are going to be seeing a lot of in this album as well. Then we're heading into the track Valhalla, and as you can imagine, there's going to be references to Vikings, almost brothers in arms, the use of lightning, riding the lightning, lots of great lyrics that all revolve around the theme of these songs. It's something that Chris Adam does so very well in most of the writing for Smash Into Pieces. He loves to tie everything together in this nice little bundle where all the lyrics do tie in with the theme. And interestingly as well, again, we've got this very plain guitar opening. It's almost very reminiscent of the opening track to Metallica's Ride the Lightning, Fight Fire with Fire, very similar to that. So whether they've drawn that in accidentally or they did it on purpose, but it's a nice little thing that I really just kind of felt was there at the opening of this track. We've also got the excellent use of harmonies. The lyric, Heavens are ablaze and my brothers cry, to Valhalla it's our time. And then we've got this harmony almost forming like a war cry, like a load of Vikings charging into battle, almost like they know their death is coming, they're going to Valhalla, again trying to emulate this really big event where you can't imagine the scale of it, and these sounds are really well used. It's something that if you compare it to some of their previous work, you notice the difference in the levels of the sound and how they've done that so very effectively. Then we've got the track Freight Train, which has a very American, almost Wild West idea to it. Again, opening with a very soft guitar, almost like an American twang to it. You can just imagine this freight train rolling through the desert of the Wild West, and they really do paint these pictures very well with the instruments. As much as they kind of blend in a lot of different lyrics, using the instruments to really set the scene just straight away from the open in the first 10-15 seconds is done very well. They also make very good use of lots of ambient sounds as well, using an actual train at the start and the end of this particular track, and also using the drums, just tapping on the side of the drums to emulate this sound of a train rolling along the tracks. I think it's a really small thing they do, but it's just nice to see the attention to detail on this track. It is another song as well with these big soundscapes. We've got this unstoppable object coming our way. We're the observer again, and they keep putting us in this position of being in front of something so mighty and so powerful. And there's also one other thing I really love that Chris Adam does with the lyrics on this song. The particular lyric, "From steel and flame I'm carved." Now, it's something that may seem so small, but it has a very big impact. He could have said, "From steel and flame I'm forged," which would be kind of make more logical sense. But if forging is a very blunt process, it's with being carved, it's a much more precise process. You're kind of this being of precision. You're kind of on a mission to do one thing. So just that slight change in words from what would be an atypical lyric really just adds that extra detail to it. This is what I mean when he really does put the effort into making sure that every element of his songwriting really just has as much impact in it as it can, and just one word really does make all the difference on this lyric. We do round out this track as well with another great guitar solo. There's so many of them on this. I love that they keep throwing it at the end of every single track. Just that moment of power, that moment of build up is really strong as well before we do round out with the train almost kind of reaching the station, using the sounds of that as well to really just let the song kind of come to a nice close. Then we have the track Guillotine. I didn't feel this was one of the strongest tracks on this album. It has a great theme to it. I get the idea, some of the lyrics referencing the idea of losing your head, something that a guillotine is great at. And they also do make references to things such as Olympus, again, keeping in with that idea of these things that are completely above you, these things of force, things of power, which a guillotine is. It removes the life from a body, effectively. So, again, something that has a lot of power and a lot of ability to make somebody feel very small. Does also see the return of Chris's growled vocals that we haven't seen much on previous albums. It's something that he seems to be returning to on this album, with it delving more towards that rock sound, which is great to see, something that I've kind of missed on some of their previous releases. Then we've got the track Throne, a cat song all about standing your ground, not letting someone take your throne from you. And one thing I love they do in this track is they use very short lines. And this is almost like to kind of suggest a ruler addressing their community. They don't want to use big words, they don't want to kind of alienate the people that they're trying to talk to, and that's done again through these lyrics. Very short, very simple words, no kind of really extended words, no long lyrics that you should really get lost in, just keeping it short, snappy and simple, and helps really kind of address that message that this is my throne, you will not take it from me. And it's again that idea of addressing that idea of, again, beings of power. We're seeing a lot of this throughout the first half of the album, and we are going to see a little bit of a switch after this track, but I like that all this theme has been running throughout the first 5 or 6 tracks on the album. As we head into track 7 and the latter stages of the album, we are going to see a bit of a break from what we have seen on the first half of this album, and I do feel this track was very much written in reference to the war in Ukraine. It revolves the idea around vanguard, about leading the way, kind of standing beside people and kind of providing that assistance when needed, never backing down. And one thing I really like about this track is that the use of whistling. It almost signals something like the Hunger Games, with Katniss Everdeen using the whistle to bring people together, bring a community together. A whistle could be a call for reinforcements, it could be a hidden signal. So just all referencing with the idea of vanguard and kind of really backing people up and having that sense of unison as well. And we're going to see that throughout this entire track. It really is a very, very powerful piece about kind of being a trendsetter, leading the way, and just kind of fighting for what you believe in, which we've seen on quite a few of these tracks as well. And we're going to see more of, especially with songs like such as Throne, more so in the latter stages of the album. Then in at track 8 we have got Heathens, a song that opens with a nice harmonica intro, again giving that very American twang to it, almost like we're in Texas or somewhere like that. They really have played around with a lot of the soundscapes, using these instruments to really generate the idea of putting you in there, really immersing you in this album. And it certainly is one of the catchier tracks. It certainly has a much more melodic sound to it, and it's something that many of these tracks haven't had in comparison to previous albums. Because they've delved more towards rock, it's kind of hard, they've had to drop the pace a little bit and lose that melodic sound, but this song certainly does that. It also has some really cool catchy references as well, referencing to the Apocalypse DJ, referencing to APOC. We've even got the lyric, "If you don't like it, then we smash you into pieces," just referencing on the band's name, a bit of wordplay. This song is definitely a little bit of fun, just as a song to kind of break away from a lot of the seriousness that they've been trying to cover in the rest of the album. Then for track 9 we do have The Rain, which is probably meant to be one of the softer tracks on this album, but they're not going too soft to the point where you're kind of losing the pace of the album. They're keeping the idea of big guitars in the sounds. They don't want to lose that rock tempo that they've built up that has been running throughout the entire album, but it certainly is a much softer one, talking about forgetting the past, let the rain wash it away. And it still has those ties to almost biblical sense, with the lyric, "And when the flood has gone, I'll stand beneath the sun, I'll be the only one," almost like that idea of Noah and his ark, kind of the world being washed away, that again apocalypse idea. And it's something they've toyed with on so many previous albums, kind of the end of the world and kind of fighting for that. And if you know the whole story of the band, it will maybe make more sense with this idea of where they're going through and what the story delves you through, which you can see through a lot of their music videos. Then in track 10 we do have A Shot in the Dark, another track that's kind of more catchy, very punchy track, but more of a sing-along, very similar to songs such as Heathens, almost trying to appeal to that mainstream sound a bit more with some of the later tracks on this album. It does that very well. This album has been a lot more difficult to have the ability to connect with its audience. It feels like it's a much more meaningful album, but because it's dropped some of those electronic elements, we're not seeing as much of that connectivity and that ability to just sing along to every song because it's lost some of that catchiness. So songs such as A Shot in the Dark and Heathens really kind of help keep people and keep the listeners really involved and give them songs they can sing along to very easily. Then rounding out the album we do have Dead Man. I quite like that this is used as the outro, the idea of death being final, the idea of a dead man, you're coming to the end. So I really like they've done that rather than putting Disconnect at the end of the album. I love they've used that to split the chapters, and this is a song that really kind of almost deals with a finite ending. And again, we're going back to that very wild westy sound, almost like a bounty hunter talks about smoking you out. There's a bullet with your name on, something you see in almost like a lot of movies, putting a bullet on someone's name because it's designed for them. And again, this idea of smoking people out, being a bounty hunter, trying to track down a bounty or reward or seek vengeance depending on what your motives are. But again, this language is really used to kind of just build this idea of this world that we're in, to really set the scene, and that's what they've done with the instruments very well on this album as well. Really used them to build these worlds around the listener and put them in it, put them at the forefront of what is happening with each of these songs, which I think is very difficult to do on almost every track, because considering they're covering so many areas, the Egyptians, almost like the American South, and a lot of different places, almost like Guillotine, that French Revolution idea, but they really do use the music to really just pull you in. Even some of the smaller instruments, such as the harmonica, really are used to full effect. Overall, I do feel this is one of the stronger albums the band have released over recent years. I've loved the melodic sounds of some of their previous albums, and I like that this is kind of disconnected from that a bit, but I love they're still building these big soundscapes, these apocalyptical ideas on the first half of this album, really making you the observer, making you feel so insignificant just through the use of instruments and the music alone, which is very impressive and really a difficult thing to do, especially for 5 or 6 tracks in a row. I like they've explored these more rock elements and moved slightly away from the electronic, and although it loses the melody, it really does make up in power. The power of these tracks are very, very impressive. And I'm glad to see them returning to some of the elements they've dropped over recent albums. Chris's growled vocals making a return. While he's not the strongest when it comes to growled vocals, it's nice to see him adding that into the more aggressive tracks. Also, Per and Ben doing a great job on guitar and bass, really adding some nice solos to this album. It's something I really did enjoy on many of the tracks where they are featured towards the end of each song. And Apoc just as reliable as ever. I mean, when the story revolves around him, he's got to be at the forefront. He's got to be providing that power, and he does that on this album. I think overall, I'm going to have to give this album a solid 8 out of 10. I really do love some of the elements on this. I love Chris's lyrical work, just tying everything together in every single song. It really is impressive how much detail and how many small things he puts into each song that really make it stand out and really do improve the songwriting overall, because everything ties together so nicely. And the instrumentation as well, building these big soundscapes, some really nice solos towards the end of many of these songs, and also encompassing some songs that have a much more mainstream feel to them as well, not just alienating audiences by just having pure rock songs that aren't quite as melodic and as catchy. It is something we maybe could have seen maybe 1 or 2 more of, but I like the themes we do see on this album as well, and the ways they've explored lots of different areas and lots of different sounds throughout. As always though, please do feel free to let me know your thoughts about this album in the comments section below, and if you want to see more content like this, then please do feel free to subscribe, and I will see you in the next album analysis.